Busy people and lots of yellies, Worcester hipsters and fed up townies. We have more than pizza in common, with two rocks for bookends. New Haven, New Haven, New Haven, between two rocks.
And welcome back to the Between Two Rocks podcast. I'm your host, Josh Levinson. Sorry, it has been a few weeks since I have joined you. I have been riding that sweet depression wave pretty hard. So just been hard to email guests and be like, all right, do you want to do a thing? Because honestly, I could just never do anything again and that would be fine. So, but we're back and I'm excited and I'm feeling a little bit better. So, we're hanging in there and, just sharing a little about myself. To start off, be a little vulnerable. Sure, I'll regret that, but that's okay.
Yeah. Instantly, you will regret it.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. It's good. I think it builds solidarity, right? For all the sad people out there who are afraid to talk about it.
Yeah.
You know? So, anyway, those dulcet tones you hear are my co-host, Sean Murray.
That's me.
See,
if you wanted
you really
to,
came off that dulcet quickly.
Yeah. If you wanted to help yourself break out of that depression funk, you picked the last. Like
Activity?
the worst possible guest to have on, because I am right there.
No. I
we
think
were
it's
surfing
good.
that wave together. It was
but that makes me feel a little better though. Yeah. If you were like sometimes I tell Colin when I'm feeling sad and he just doesn't get it. He's just like, yeah, but what about how great the world is? I'm like, all right, you got to stop talking, man. That's just, he's just excited to be alive. It's irritating.
I don't even understand it.
Yeah. He's very tall and handsome, I think.
Yeah.
So are you, though.
I'm pretty tall and fairly handsome.
Yeah,
so
agreed.
I should feel a lot better.
You would think, but it turns out there's not a strong correlation. So we are kind of rotating co-hosts, as I've mentioned in the past. Like we're using Colin a lot, and I love Colin. He's great, but he kind of has the same energy / opinions as me about New Haven. So I feel like having different co-hosts actually may have a different, experience. So like Sean, you grew up in New Haven.
And I'm a very conservative person. So
exactly.
you wanted to get
he's just decked out in Make America Great Again outfit.
Top to bottom.
That's
my entire, he's like a cartoon character that only always wears the same outfit of a closet full of
exactly right.
That's for every day of the week. And alternates,
And you got to use that color guard because you're committed to this.
I'm using Woolite, I'm using Cheer. From time to time.
Right. Oh, you're committed. I got it. You got your guy in there. He's doing great. But yeah, you grew up in New Haven?
Yes, I sure did. And I
went to co-op?
I went to co-op, the art school.
Yeah, where I gave a talk recently about podcasting.
Yeah.
And I would say it was 40% of those kids paid attention. And that's pretty good, I think.
That's pretty good because what the percentage when I went there was a lot lower. Dude, going to co-op was so funny, and graduating and then seeing how much people are so much better than you now. I remember when I first started at co-op in 9th grade, I don't know, 40% of the students didn't even care what art discipline they were in. They were just
really?
And then I go when I go back to visit now, everyone is just a model student, and it's how it's supposed to be, but it makes me feel weird. It's maybe we should have I did moderated a panel for arts and ideas, and there were a couple of students that went to co-op there, and one of them was the liaison for the students on the board of education. I was we would never even think about speaking to anyone on the board of education, let alone being
involved,
a member of it.
Yeah.
So it's great to see everyone's better than me now.
No, come on, you have a bachelor's degree in something not helpful,
something unimportant, and unuseful.
But anyway, I'm hoping you got a different perspective of things than I do. I'm I've only been in New Haven for 8 or 9 years, so and I'm a gentrifying White Devil, as we've discussed previously, and so you're the person I'm dispossessing or whatever, right? Displacing, sure.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I think we've covered who you are roughly. Do you have anything else you want to discuss who you are as a human?
Love a good gummy worm.
Oh yeah, you're a big candy head like me.
Yeah, big time.
You're also a sober person.
Big time.
Yep.
I like to not drink beer.
Cool. Yeah, agreed. I used to like to drink beer, but
yeah, I drink the fake beer, which is so funny to me.
It is.
It's because the taste is not what you're here for. So it's
bad. And it's worse than regular beer even, which is not good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's quite bad.
It's pretty It's interesting choice.
What is-
Just get a juice, dude. It's okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
I love a cranberry juice.
I forgot to fucking start the timer again. How far are we in it? Can you give me hands? 5? Okay, cool. All right, so let's introduce our guest. How about that?
Let's do it.
Okay, cool.
We're gonna do it in unison. No,
3, 2, 1.
All right.
Lee Cruz, you are the Citizen Outreach Director of Community Outreach?
Director of Community Outreach at the Community Foundation.
Okay.
For Greater New Haven.
Nice. All right. Oh,
It's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful, but
Yeah.
as I found all those sort of nonprofits are.
Yeah, but
right?
it sounds great when Lee said that you were just throwing together like generally
Community
outreach kind of words. Yeah, you're like
director. I think I'm landing on it. So.
You're like community liaison partner for the general
They probably have one of those.
anti-gentrification league.
I was going through all the job titles, and there was quite a few of those. So Lee, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, cool. So what do you do? You're the director of community outreach. What does that involve?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Basically, I connect people, nonprofits, and businesses to create social and economic capital.
Economic capital. I love.
Think about that.
Okay. How do I spend social capital?
Social capital.
Is that how I get people to like me?
Someone says the most valuable.
Yeah, social capital is expended when you want to get something done and you want to bring people together. And so you save it up and then you invest it, hopefully wisely.
Okay. What kind of APR you get on something like that?
Oh, I think it's actually quite a high APR if you do it right.
Okay, that's good. I do love my compounding interest. Yeah, that's nice. So can you give me an example of bringing people together to get something done?
So bringing people together to get something done can be as simple as and as complicated as a dream for a mural in a neighborhood and how...
Like the one Quajo Adai made?
I'm sorry?
Like the one Quajo Adai made?
Yes.
Quajo? Yeah.
Yeah, that's
He's been a previous guest. Please check out that episode.
Yeah, there you go. Little plug in there.
That's right. Stop listening to this episode immediately and listen to that other.
It's like reading House of Leaves. I mean, not House. Like Infinite Jest, where you have to keep referencing the footnotes to get back into the story.
Yeah. So bringing a group of people together is what we did a few years ago in the neighborhood where I live. Chatham Square which is a section of Fairhaven. We brought together 109 people in a day and a half to paint a mural with a muralist who was visiting from Puebla, Mexico. And it took a couple of days to do the planning, but the actual painting was literally a day and a half.
Okay.
It's on Grand Avenue, 69 Grand Avenue. Go check it out.
Okay.
How much red tape is involved in something like that? Like, is it difficult to like get that approved? Like, do you have to? Is that like a city thing? Is that like a business? Like talking to the person, the owner of the business?
It depends where the mural is. Obviously, if it's a private owner, you're going to have to get permission from that person. If it's going to the other extreme, if it's something like under 91, that required permission from the state because the highway and the walls underneath of it belong to the highway. We created a mural on the exterior doors of a school building that is not being used. So since the building is not being used, the doors are boarded up. And so we basically went to the school system and said, we're going to paint this mural on these boards that you've put up because they face our main street. And we have a desire to make our main street look more beautiful. And so we made a mural.
And they were just like, cool.
They were like, cool. And we kind of had so much time, so we figured we'd just get it done.
Yeah.
How do you decide on like a design like for something like that, or even like the artist? You're where's it, Pueblo, Mexico?
Here's what happened. We knew the artist was coming. He's related to someone who lives in New Haven.
Okay.
He was coming for a visit, so we knew that much.
So you're like, any opportunity to not hire local artists, if we can outsource this to Mexico, let's just do it.
every project is different. This
No, I
one
know.
happened to
I'm just
involve an
teasing.
artist that wasn't from town. So we met on Wednesday evening, and we gave him all of our ideas, which basically the theme is the ethno-cultural history of Fairhaven. People who came here, from the indigenous people who were here when the English arrived, all the way to the current era, where we're getting people from India, from China, moving into the neighborhood. So in any case, so we gave them all of our ideas, figuring that if let's see, like 27 people participated, open meeting, anybody could come. 27 people showed up, gave him all the ideas. We figured, let's let him, he's a really great, very well-known muralist in Puebla. And so let him decide. So what wound up happening is he took all of our ideas and he put them on a 27-foot piece of paper and rolled it out in front of us on Friday. And people had some minor comments and suggestions. And then he went out and he basically hand drew it sort of with a marker onto this wall on Friday evening.
Okay.
And then Saturday, around 9 o'clock, a bunch of people descended and we started painting. And we painted all day Saturday and half day on Sunday. And then he came in and did what artists do to make
Criticize you until you were perfect.
to make
Or
it
that's what
look,
moms do. I don't know.
yeah.
I can't.
Well, this was an artist, not a professional mom. Actually, his wife was here and his daughter was here, and his daughter worked with some of the kids around the sides of the building, and we wound up with an incredible mural that people regionally have come to visit.
That's awesome.
The mural. It's also registered as a mural painted by a Mexican muralist, because in Mexico, muralists get a special number that is their ID number, and so this mural is certified as having been done by Miguel, who is just a phenomenal person.
Cool. So what's the address again?
So the address is 69 Grand Avenue. It's the intersection of Grand Avenue with Clinton Avenue, and there's a bus stop right in front in both directions, so it's very easy to get there.
Yeah, and that Grand Ave bus runs very frequently, so you got no excuse.
No excuse.
It's not like that, it's not like that Whitney Ave bus where you're like, never mind, if I miss it, that's it.
Yeah, I used to catch that bus a lot to go to school, and not fun to miss the bus that you need to get. Like, because it's like you gotta catch
like a
that
full
one
hour,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's like I'm just gonna skip this class.
Yeah.
Go to my 4 o'clock class now.
That mural, by the way, is the biggest mural we've ever done, but it's not the first. We've actually done.
So do you like talk shit to the other murals? You're like,
Yeah.
look at that baby mural. What, you think that's nice? Come on. You 60 square feet? Get the fuck out of
step
here.
your game up.
Yeah, exactly.
We got him in here to
Bigger is better.
Yeah.
Whoever told you otherwise.
At least in murals.
Right, yeah. No, in all
certainly
life.
a mural.
Certainly murals, and
Yes.
in any other aspect, really. Other than sitting on an airplane. It's really the only other time it's bad. Cool. So 69 Grand Ave. Very cool. So that was one project you helped put together. And you've been involved in community organizing like quite a while.
So I came to New Haven after graduate school in 1983.
Oh my gosh.
Directed a dropout prevention program for Hispanic youth. I know I'm ancient.
I'm glad you said it. Yeah, definitely. We're like both recoiling in horror. Yeah.
Been
Sean
around
wasn't even
for a
alive
while.
then.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I'm always fascinated when somebody was not only like alive at that point, but old enough to be doing stuff. Like,
Yeah.
like somebody the other day was like, they're like, yeah, I went to a concert, like in 1984. Like, so not only were you alive in 1984, you were old enough to be like going to concerts on your own. Like, and I was 10 years from being born.
Yeah.
Well, 9
There
years.
you go. So came here.
Where'd you go to graduate school?
Brandeis University
Okay, where is that?
in Waltham, Massachusetts.
Okay.
And I'm kind of fond of saying something that my friend actually invented. This quote: "I wasn't born in New Haven, but I got here as fast as I could."
Oh, that's very adorable.
Isn't that adorable?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So directed a dropout prevention program. Worked for a little while in Hartford.
Is it a drop-off prevention program?
A dropout prevention.
Dropout prevention. Okay. Cool.
Drop out of high school.
Yeah. I get it now.
Please try to keep up.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time.
Lee,
all right.
I'm here with you, Josh.
Okay,
Just
thank you.
drink your coffee and catch up,
That's
please.
right. That's right.
I would say another 20 minutes. I'm going to be right in this podcast. I'm going to be ready to
Right
go.
on time.
Right on time.
You guys can start rolling in 20 minutes.
Yeah,
That would be,
We're gonna. This is all going on.
yeah, this is all pre-roll.
Pre-roll. That's right.
So to continue, so
Sorry.
dropout prevention program, Hartford. Then I went to live and work for a year in Nicaragua through the New Haven Little Sister City project, and I wound up staying for 12 years.
Okay.
And came back to New Haven in the late 90s, 98.
Okay.
And since then, I've been working in a number of nonprofits in a variety of areas: the arts, health, housing, and now at the Community Foundation, which is a funder of nonprofits.
Okay. So now you can get involved in all the things.
Exactly.
So when you graduated, like when you came out of grad school, like you knew you wanted to be like involved in community. Like what was your degree?
Well, my degree is a master's in management of human services. A much more well-known degree that's similar is an MPA, a master's in public administration.
Yeah.
And so it's basically about running organizations whose main purpose is not necessarily to make a profit, but it can include making a profit.
Yeah. So you knew you wanted to be involved in like the community and not necessarily like in government or whatever.
Yeah, my interest has been more in nonprofit and civic organizations more than government. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, like why one versus the other? They seem like similar-ish careers, like both in public service to some extent, you know. But
I feel like this is just my opinion. I went to school for urban studies, so I always felt like just being in that major in that field of study, it just feels like you can actually do like you can feel like you're achieving more on a day-to-day basis. Like even when there's like red tape to fight through, like being in government.
you are the red tape.
You are the red tape, and there's certain things that you just can't get around. You know what I mean? Like you have to kind of like you're like dictating the law to the people versus like when you're in the community, you get to like kind of fight against that and like work around that a little more.
The distinction between being in the public sector, whether that be a public nonprofit, government on the one hand, versus the private sector is in the private sector. The mission is clear. You know, you're either making money or you're not. That is the purpose of a business, is to make money.
Yeah.
In the public
Take that
sector,
customers, not really to serve you.
in the public sector and in nonprofits, you have to make enough money. You have to bring in money to run the organization. In the government, you do that through taxes, and nonprofits through donations. But you also have a mission that may not meet the income requirements, so you subsidize it with donations. You're mandated by the will of the people in government that, you know, we want our garbage picked up, we want our streets paved, we want, you know, so even if those things aren't making money, and even if you can't always get it right by the will of the people, you still have to keep doing it, and it's your responsibility. Now, more recently, some people have been about the notion of, well, why don't we farm some of this out to the private sector? And that's all well and good when it works, and sometimes it does work, and we have examples here in New Haven where it works. We also have examples where it doesn't work.
Can you give me an example of each?
Of each. Okay, so here in New Haven, we have the New Haven Housing Authority, and mandated by the federal government.
Yeah.
You know, actually is a branch, an extension through HUD.
I did see some very beautiful new housing come up on like the Quinnipiac River. I was super impressed by.
Right.
I don't know if it's good or not, but
that's only that housing, which looks beautiful, is 10 years old.
Okay.
Monterey on Dixwell is almost 20 years old. So how does that?
That still feels new.
How does that work?
They do look great, yeah.
Yeah. So how does that work? In that particular case, instead of building and managing, the housing authority contracts a private company and pays them an agreed upon price, obviously, for building it. They know they're going to manage it, and they get incentivized to manage it
some
properly.
Sort of credit for like public housing.
They get paid for certain outcomes. So as a result of that, that housing, which is overseen by the housing authority, looks better. You know, it has that incentive to keep it looking as nice as it does and operating as nice as it does. The other housing the housing authority manages, they're more hard pressed because forces above and beyond the housing authority are constantly putting pressure on them to keep the cost down. After all, it's only housing for poor people, right?
Yeah, they don't deserve nice things,
you got to
obviously.
keep that cost down. Some of the same people will say, well, if we're going to pay the private sector, well, they got to be able to make a profit or else they're not going to do it. And lo and behold, when you get enough money to do it right and you're properly incentivized, you get the outcome of Quinnipiac Terrace, you get the outcome of, now I'm blanking out, I just said
Monterey?
Of Monterey. You know, they look really beautiful. Now, there's
And do
also,
you think people take more like pride in that, like when they, when they live in something like that, and then that gives them better outcomes of like changing their lives? Or?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Where you live and how that place is designed, built, and maintained has a huge impact, particularly on kids as they grow up with that base of a sense of aesthetic beauty and safety. To the extent that can be provided, absolutely, it makes a difference. It's a platform you step off of that it has a feeling of safety and a feeling of community that is absolutely necessary for kids to grow up to be healthy, contributing human beings.
Yeah. So that's an example of a positive outcome essentially working. And what will be an example of like a negative outcome?
Absolutely, prisons.
Okay.
Prisons,
sure.
Prisons
For private prisons,
privatized have not worked. They just have not worked. What has happened is the people who run these prisons, these private prisons, pocket a huge profit and in fact do not provide a good service for anyone. Not just for the people that are in prison, for their families, for the government, for no one. No one benefits so far from private prisons except the people who own them and the people who invest in them.
It's just, it's like the idea that keeping people in captivity should be profitable is so insane. Like, if you're incentivized to do that, it's so fucked up.
I mean, that's just like, the issue with capitalism, like down, like it's just, they trying to profit off of most of the things that people try to profit off of is just the problem.
Yeah, that and like healthcare, the two things where I'm just like, we can't.
Like the idea isn't about money at all. Like why is this? Yeah.
Yeah, like it can't be the choice of whether you live or die or you're free or not cannot be based on how much money we make. And I am kind of vaguely a capitalist where it's like I think to some extent the markets can be efficient when it's like stuff that can make our lives better or more interesting in different ways. You know what I mean? Like, is it cool that I can get a decent job and maybe buy stuff that I care about versus somebody maybe doesn't care about buying more video games or like having a nicer car? You know what I mean? It's like it's fine either way. But I don't know. Some of this stuff is wild.
Incentivizing people to make the housing in which the most vulnerable of our population lives, that is something that should be incentivized. And the payoff for that is tremendous.
Yeah.
When people have good, decent, safe housing, they start thinking about with greater focus on what their kids can and should be.
Yeah.
They start thinking about themselves in terms of, okay, so now that I know that I live in a safe place and I have a sense of community. What can I do to better myself, which makes them a good example for their kids who are studying? So there's all sorts of ripple effects that come out of good housing that are not always recognized and acknowledged. Also, placing housing for people who have a lower economic income in a community where there can be a greater sense of diversity also works. Study after study indicates that we have the outcomes that we're getting in terms of school systems because we're racist. And when we allow kids to study together, to mix together of various socioeconomic and racial backgrounds, all the kids benefit from that. Grades go up for everybody.
I was just going to say, I feel like as a student at co-op, I feel like I definitely benefited, and I saw the benefits of that because, co-op in New Haven, a lot of the students are from outside of New Haven. So for not me personally, but I know a lot of students who had never interacted with a certain different backgrounds, whether it be the students from in New Haven or the students from outside, and it just gave you like just richer perspectives and like just more to like draw off of, and like a kind of better sense of like what the world outside of your own space is.
I think living in New Haven has done that for me personally. Like I grew up in a very white town in Coventry, Connecticut, and my parents were pretty liberal. Like they were very like cognizant of like, hey, don't treat people differently because of their race or whatever. But like you can say all that, but if you're not actually around people who are different than you, like that, there's only so far that goes, you know? And so like actually being around people who have totally different backgrounds, like, oh, okay, people live very differently than me. And that's like important to be aware of when I interact with them, because I can't assume that they know what I know and vice versa,
This is exactly why my wife Sarah and I have decided to bring our kids up in New Haven, and we chose Fairhaven because if you walk around our neighborhood, not only will you see the variety of incomes of New Haven, 50% of the kids in our neighborhood live at or below the poverty level. 2% or more of the people in our neighborhood have household incomes of $200,000 or more.
Wow.
They have houses on the waterfront or condos, beautiful, other beautiful housing. When our kids walk around our neighborhood, they hear English, Spanish, Italian, Polish, Mandarin, Hindi, Hebrew, French are all spoken within a block or two of my house.
French, God.
And you can go down Grand Avenue and eat at a restaurant from where the owners are from Peru or from Mexico or from China. The best, what I consider to be the best Puerto Rican food on Grand Avenue. The owner's from China. Born and raised in China.
What's the restaurant?
El Coqui, right in front of Columbus School.
Yeah.
Great Puerto Rican food. Juan, the owner, is a friend of mine, born in China, moved from China to Cuba, where he had relatives, came from Cuba to the United States, bought that restaurant, he and his wife. He's put 2 kids, he's put his son through college, his daughter's at UConn right now, and all on Puerto Rican food on Grand Avenue.
I definitely feel like Fairhaven, outside of like just downtown, because it's the center, is like the liveliest kind of part of the city. And I like, what do you think contributes to that? Is it some of that the diversity of the community, and like what other factors would
Okay, hold on. Before we get to that, we do need to take a very short commercial break. But I think it's a great time to do it because that's a very good question, So we
cliffhanger for the audience.
Exactly.
Hey, I'm Alexander Bogle, host of Black Tech New England. I'm on a mission to explore how Black culture and technology intersect within the New England area, which has some of the highest concentrations of wealth and education on the planet. Join me by subscribing to Black Tech New England on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
And we're back. Thank you so much for for hanging with us. And the question was about what was it? You make
See, exactly. This is why you don't cut me off in the middle of the question.
Yeah, but you kept asking questions. It's so hard. You got so many good questions. It's hard.
The question was, so I feel like we all kind of agreed that Fairhaven is one of the livelier.
Yeah, definitely.
Probably, I would say, other than downtown, it's probably the liveliest.
Yeah, when I'm walking down Grand Ave, I'm like, this is fucking straight up vibrant. These people are.
Yeah, like it's like it's the most kind of feeling of a community of any part of New Haven. And I was asking why, like, we think contributes to that.
Yeah. Well, I think that diversity is definitely a factor. And I'm going to mention a number of things that I think are factors, but no one of them by itself is what makes the difference. It's the combination of these things. So
I was going to say, my neighborhood's plenty diverse, but not that lively.
Yeah.
Fairhaven it has been historically a diverse neighborhood because many immigrants have come through that part of the city.
And you mentioned like there were waves of immigration in the past. So
yes, definitely. From
give some examples.
Obviously, the indigenous people were here. When the English arrived in Fairhaven, it was a couple of years after New Haven, 1638. Through Fairhaven, we've seen waves of Irish, German, Russian, French. More French Canadian. Okay. We've seen the Puerto Rican community go through. Now a lot of people from Mexico, Ecuador, and probably 17 other countries in Latin America. There are people.
I've been meeting a lot of Venezuelans lately.
From India.
Maybe coincidence?
China. So quite the diversity. So that is very helpful. Things in terms of vibrancy and in terms of happening, they happen in some people would argue in waves. I would say they're kind of like plateaus. So the neighborhood had a heyday, let's say in the 50s and 60s with factories. It transitioned very successfully from being a predominantly Polish neighborhood to being a predominantly Italian neighborhood. During the time of that transition, these two brothers that I know, the Fabrizio brothers, opened their dry cleaners business on Grand Avenue. This was probably 60 years ago. Hard to get people to go to them because they were Italian.
Yeah.
And most of the neighborhood was Polish. And most people, that kind of blows their mind because they think, historically, it was an Italian neighborhood. That's that's about the length of a person's life going back into the 50s and 40s. Then the numbers drop off significantly after that. So they ran that dry cleaners until just a few years ago and saw the neighborhood fully transition into being Italian and then transition into being Puerto Rican and then the variety of people from Latin America. And now we're getting bits and pieces of other nationalities and cultures for different reasons. But also we have to remember that back in the 80s, in the mid-80s, Fairhaven was the heart of the Latin King, the gang called the Latin Kings, who were the big crack cocaine folks nationally, or one of them at least.
Yeah, because I got to know it's them.
Yeah, if you don't know who the Latin Kings are...
I know who the Latin Kings are, but I just wasn't aware that they were like the... I mean, I just feel like,
they were big.
If it was the 80s and you were in a gang, you were selling crack. Like, that's how you make your money, right? Like,
Well, for maybe some of your listeners that don't know, they can just Google Latin Kings and New Haven and get the history there. So that was a very difficult time. It was a time where Fairhaven was, in certain respects, all neighborhoods are different, but in certain respects, where New Hallville is now.
Yeah.
Right? New Hallville has right now, I believe, the highest incidence of gun violence in the city. And back then, New Hallville had Winchester. It was different. It was a different time. It was a different place. So the plateaus that I'm referring to, neighborhoods don't stay stagnant. Some people say, well, neighborhoods getting better. We got to be careful. We don't want it to gentrify. Well, I would argue that yes, we do. We do want the neighborhood to gentrify, but we want it to gentrify slowly and with the participation of the people who live there.
Yeah.
We want the tide that is raising the boats in that neighborhood to raise the existing boats that are there. And the way we do that is we help people to get better jobs. We help people to get into housing that is secure for them, whether that be a subsidized unit or they go into home ownership. We help people not only to get jobs, but to create businesses and to own those businesses and to grow those businesses.
Yeah.
And then that's how that group of people moves up with whoever might be moving in. And the neighborhood is going to get better, and some people are not going to catch on. It's not the right time for them, and they will be moved out of the neighborhood. And the question is, where will they go?
Yeah.
And the sad reality is that there's neighborhoods that are going up and there's neighborhoods that are going down. And the neighborhoods that are going down, they can be caught and slowed down in their de-escalation,
Right.
and help to come back up again. But I think it's a foolhardy thing to say, let's keep this neighborhood. Let's keep this neighborhood for poor people. Let's keep this neighborhood for black people or for Latino people.
Yeah.
Yes, we need to recognize the history and the culture in our neighborhoods. We need to celebrate it, use it to make the neighborhood better, try to get as many of the people who are there to grow with the neighborhood, to improve it, always making sure that there's some amount of housing in as many different places that's for low-income folks, because they will actually help make the neighborhood better.
So what do you think about, like, one of the things Connecticut has had really struggled with lately is, like, the state has basically demanded that towns have a certain percentage of affordable housing, but then every time there's, like, an affordable housing project, the suburbs are like, oh, you're changing the character of this neighborhood. You know, you can't just build these housing projects here. And it's like, is it really it's just institutional racism? Is it like, I mean, how do we get people on board with the idea, like, this is going to help your community too? Like, having different people is just going to help, like, it does sounds crazy, but,
So the answer to your question is yes, it is racism.
Okay.
Yes, it is racism.
How do we make them not be less racist?
Well,
can we just yell at them until they're like fine? Or
the first step is acknowledgement. We have to acknowledge that we live in a racist society and that we ourselves are racist. That's the first step.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest.
Nailed it.
That's the hardest thing.
Yeah.
Right?
I did read this interesting thing. It was like about how, like, being aware of, like, your own, like it's not about, like, pretending you're, like, free of racism. It's just like, if you just acknowledge it and be like, okay, here's where I'm coming from, but I can, like, correct this behavior, is like it's just a better attitude than try to pretend like you're above it.
Yeah, it's like true of like any negative behavior. It's like if you're in a relationship with someone, to pretend like you're the one who's has no problem and the other person is the one has all the problems is not helpful.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing about it is, it's not just about changing your behavior, which is important. It's important to be observant of your behavior so that you can change it. But it's also important to acknowledge that there's structural racism and that the
system's in place.
Yeah, exactly. We are participant in that structural racism. And when we acknowledge that and we see it, then we can start to think about what changes need to be made in our city, what changes need to be made in our school system, in our healthcare system, to do that. So right now, for example, of all places, some people might be surprised by this, but I'm working with Yale New Haven Hospital and Yale Medical School, and we're bringing Yale residents out into our neighborhood, into Fairhaven. I know there are other people doing this in Dixwell and in West River. The hospital is asking us to bring these residents around. So these people have finished medical school, but they are not yet attending doctors. So they're in those first couple of years, and they're walking around the neighborhood.
Very troubling partners, romantically.
Yes, very
it's a little background for Josh.
We're gonna get to that in a later episode.
Speaking of my depression, residents are they're under a lot of stress. It's very hard to.
They are. Yet the hospital requires them to come out and spend time in these neighborhoods and hear from someone who lives in the neighborhood. What is this neighborhood about? Who lives here? Why? What are some of the barriers that make it difficult for them to fulfill the two basic things that a doctor wants you to do? Show up to your appointment on time, and if I prescribe you medicine, take your medicine. Well, what if you can't afford the medicine? What if it takes 2 or 3 buses to get to your medical appointment? What if you have a job where someone tells you if you miss your job, even for medical appointment, you're going to be fired? So how does that impact your health? So that's one piece. The other piece is the medical school has administrators, and I have to really take my hat off to them, inviting people from the community literally on day one, literally within the first experiences that medical students are having and physician's assistant students, is you need to understand the role that racism has played in the opiate epidemic and in the drug epidemic that we have in the country. You need to hear this from people who have research background and will explain this to you. And then you need to hear this from people who have had lived experience. And when you are a medical student and you get into one of the best medical schools in the country, and somebody who is white is telling you as a white person, and someone who is white is telling you as a brown person and as a black person who has made it, in quotes. I'm doing the air thing, so you have to tell.
Yeah, he's
right?
explaining.
Yeah, explaining.
There you go.
Telling you racism is real, racism impacts what we do, and we need to study it, and we need to hear about it from the people who are living that experience. Then that just sets a different tone for going to medical school than even just a few years ago.
Okay, nice.
I wanted to kind of piggybacking off that question. Like, do you feel there's enough affordable housing in New Haven? 'Cause I feel like every time I turn around, there's like luxury apartments, and it's not just an issue in New Haven. I feel like in any city you go to, there's always like new luxury apartments popping up, not just in like, you know, underprivileged neighborhoods, but just everywhere across the city. And it's like, who are these people? Who are these apartments?
Young professionals, you know, they're out there, they're fucking, they're having a good time.
A lot of the people
beers.
who are moving into the luxury apartments are from outside of New Haven. This is a trend that's happening in the United States. People are moving out of the big cities and moving into small, medium-sized towns like New Haven, where they can be a short distance from New York and Boston and have those benefits without having those expenses. To get back to your question of affordable housing has to be fully integrated into any housing development that we do. We cannot, I do not believe at this time, politically raise the resources that are necessary, nor do I think it is advantageous to say, let's set aside this whole huge section here, have it be just for poor people. It's hard to impossible to raise the money, and it's not good for kids who live in low-income families.
You need a little more
to
like
live
diversity
in the
of
section
incomes.
that is for poor people. What we need to do is we need to make sure that every housing project includes some amount of affordable housing across the entire city, and we need to pressure the state of Connecticut to enforce the existing laws around this type of housing, affordable housing, in towns across Connecticut.
Yeah, they're doing a good job resisting. I want to switch gears a little bit here. So one of the, I assume you follow the news pretty closely in New Haven, right? And so one of the stories that was pretty interesting to me recently was about the skate park, the pro skate park in Scantlebury Park, right? So a bunch of people raised some money. They want to build a skate park in Scantlebury Park, which is like right on the sort of border between like downtown and New Hallville and, you know, and Prospect Hill. And so they got all the approval, they got everything done, and then a bunch of people were like, hey, we're a part of the community, you didn't tell us, we're not about this. And so it's interesting to me because it's like, can you even build a project that everybody agrees on? Like, what should be the expectation? How many people should buy in? Like, how much outreach? Because, like, what percentage of New Haven residents go to a community meeting? I would say very few overall, right? And so, and I think in any project, you're gonna have somebody who's like, I don't want this. This isn't for me. I'm personally never gonna skateboard. I'm not gonna learn now. It's fine. And I understand the complaints that it's like, oh, it's loud, it's like concrete, it's going to change the character of the neighborhood. But conversely, like, if kids are skateboarding, that's like a cool hobby you can get into that's pretty like positive, I'd say, overall. It doesn't, to me, have a lot of negative connotations in terms of like leading to, I guess it could be a gateway to BMXing, which is like a huge bummer. Once people are lost to BMX,
devastated so many cities. People on BMX
families, bikes. My cousin got into BMX and just like started drinking Code Red, and that was it for him. Diabetes. I don't know. So like, how do you?
Yeah. So I would say my experience, it's practically impossible to get 100%. Agreement on a project, but it does happen every once in a while that you'll get just so overwhelming that it practically is 100%. But I think the issue with that park, I have been following it. I've attended some of the meetings. I was at the protest to the park, actually at the park.
Were you protesting actively?
No, I was there to observe what is going on. It's not my community.
Yeah.
But it is something that I'm interested in, how these things happen. Yeah. That there's like all these plans to make a conversion in this park that is significant. And the organizers who think like, we got this. Yeah. So this actually kind of ties into some other work that I'm doing at the Community Foundation. So at the Community Foundation, I run the Neighborhood Leadership Program, and we invite people from mainly New Haven, but also East Haven, West Haven, and Hamden, because similar, types of issues, to bring their ideas to do anything, which could be a mural or a skate park or whatever it is, anything in a place that builds or sustains community. And one could argue that a skate park, a skating area in that park would build a community of skaters, right?
Yeah. Edgewood is like wild. Like the community is really strong there. I walk by all the time. It would sustain
that community. So the people that go through our program, first thing we tell them to do is, you got this great idea, you're really excited about it. Before you come back to meet with us, talk to 20 people. You're going to start with the ones that you know.
Yeah, but I'm going to start with Sean. But
Sean,
you think my idea? It's bad. Okay, done.
Shut it down.
You don't want to get beyond the first 5 without talking to someone that you don't know.
Yeah,
that is from your community, and ask them what. So what? Who are you? What are you into? And here's this idea that I have to do something.
See your Netflix queue. We need to get to know each other.
Yeah. Well, it's what you need to get to know is, how does your idea sound to someone else who is invested in your community?
Do you think the organizers did that, or?
Well,
it certainly sounded like they felt they did.
Yeah, right. And so here's the tricky part about that. It's really easy to talk to people that you know. And I don't know this particular case. Yeah. I'm talking
but
in the theoretical. But you've seen this type of experience,
like where people found 30 skateboarders in the neighborhood. Like, you want this, right?
Right. Well, exactly. Because if you want to build
all these grandmas are against us.
Yeah. If you want to build a skate park, and you talk only to skaters, then your chances are you're going to get a lot of consensus. When you talk to people who aren't skaters, and when you talk to people who are
BMXers
BMXers, or their grandmas, or they're people who have had bad experiences with Yale University, bad experiences with Yale University, or people who have read or have been led to believe that it is important to maximize green space, which I happen to be one of those people. I think that in urban neighborhoods we need to have more green space. So
I do think New Haven does a pretty good job with the green space. We have a lot of trees, I'll say. We need more parks.
But my point is that by talking to these people, it's not that you're going to go out there and say, I talked to 20 people and people talking to people involves not only talking to a diverse group of people, but understanding what really underlies their fear, what really underlies their concern, what underlies their confusion about your project. Because when you do that, you're going to find that sometimes an accommodation can be found. Yeah. It's not always true, but it is surprising to me how often I've been in a situation where at first the people are at absolute loggerheads. It doesn't look like it's going to move forward.
There'll be no compromise,
but by building relationship and understanding what really is at the heart. Yeah. And sometimes what that requires is getting to what I call the fourth or the fifth level of why. Mm-hmm. Because the first time you say to people, someone, are you
heard of the 5 whys, right?
Yeah.
5 whys? Yeah, no. It's like a corporate. Oh, yeah. In corporate, they're like the 5 whys. It's like when we have a problem, you need to ask why and keep asking why to really get to the root of the issue.
Right. And there's great merit in that. Yeah. And in that process, what you might find is either it is true, there is no way to build consensus around this project, or you may find that you can actually, in the design phase or even in the pre-design phase, address some of the things. Certainly to the design phase, you want to bring some of those things that you've learned about what the fears of people are. So.
And then you're like, oh, I get it. Like, a skateboard killed your father. Like, I understand, you know? So, all right, we're getting to the point of the podcast where we like to play a few games. Mm-hmm. Which are basically just questions, but they're fun questions.
I thought we were going to spin the bottle.
I mean, we could try.
You got a bottle right there, Josh. Let's do it. Lee, you don't have to participate.
So it's just us kissing?
Yes.
Is that the game?
That's what it was all about. That's why I showed up.
Wow. It's weird
I thought I was invited.
It's just weird that this is the lighting you chose to make your move.
Hey, man.
Okay, so the first game I like to play is called Fuck, Marry, Kill. But we don't do it with humans because that would be rude. But instead, concepts. So basically, what I picked was New Haven improvement projects. So development projects over the years. One that you loved, that would be your marry. One that you hated, that'd be your kill. And one that you would fuck with. So like something that you're like, yeah, it was all right. You know? Does that make sense?
No, but let's do it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, if you can think of a better idea, I was just like, it's hard for me to be because I don't want to shit on like nonprofits or something. That sounds worse. And I can only speak to the last 10 years because that's how long, roughly I've been here.
Yeah, well, I've been here longer, so.
Yeah. I mean, I know for me, just killing the whole Coliseum being detonated, like, just because I'm sad I never got to see it and hang out in the Coliseum and see large acts. I don't think that's even like a thing anymore, really. Like, less arena shows, I guess, but I don't know. I just feel like that whole thing's just been a parking lot for, 20 years? So that's,
Yeah, I don't think it's been quite 20 years, but maybe it has.
It's close.
It's pretty close. Pretty close.
Yeah.
See, I would say I got to go in that building on more than one occasion.
It's like the Harvard Civic Center, just impressed. A soulless.
Not impressed. What I think that is sad is that we destroyed a neighborhood in the name of progress, and what I'm referring to is Route 34.
Yeah, the 34.
That from where the Coliseum used to be down toward the hospital all the way out to Route 10. Yeah, that used to be a vibrant neighborhood.
That was like many years ago,
and
right?
That was even before I came to New Haven back in the 60s.
Yeah, I did a research project on that.
They're going to, highways were going to save the world.
Sure.
And we're going to build one that was going to go from
Roger
91.
Rabbit tried to warn us. Yeah. He was there. Yeah. They were like, listen, trust the cartoons, man. No one's going to drive on a highway. It's crazy, but they did.
So that's the one. If that's the one that I would kill. I would
kill
definitely,
that one. Yeah.
If we could undo that, the Hill and West River and Dwight, that the intersection of those neighborhoods would be totally different if that neighborhood still existed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, until about the time that I moved to New Haven, a little bit after that, there was a group called the Oak Street I don't know if they would call themselves neighborhood association, but they were people who grew up in that neighborhood in their 60s are the oldest ones that I remember, reminiscing and still getting together periodically. They may have killed the infrastructure, but that sense of community was still there decades after the neighborhood was not.
Cool. What about you, Sean? Would you also kill that?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing really to support
sort of
there.
No context.
Because, well, here's the thing. It's like, I agree with Lee. Like, the Coliseum as an entity wasn't great. I like the idea of there being a Coliseum, something like that, to like bring in that kind of like those levels of events or whatever. Yeah. But for it to be there, then destroy that community and then be destroyed, and it is now, like you said, just a parking lot. Like, they've been talking about like this downtown revitalization project about building all this stuff. Yeah, but it's hasn't happened yet, and so I don't know if I'm falling either side, but I think if there isn't going to be a Coliseum, there should at least be something to show for that space, like just not being just a bunch of parking lots.
All right, cool. What about, do we love any development projects?
So I would say that I really love how New Haven is being turned into a city whose streets are for people walking, people biking, and cars. The combination of those are the three major ways that people get around, and I would say scooters are in there somewhere, but the point really is cool that people. Complete streets make sense to me. Streets where motorized vehicles have to go more slowly, and streets where bicycles are welcome and it is a safe environment for them as well as for people who are walking, is something that I love about New Haven.
Yeah, we still had a lot of issues with like pedestrian deaths and stuff. There were a bunch like in this year. It's been car drivers, they're the worst. I did drive my car here, but but it's raining.
Yeah, come on.
Come on. I don't know.
You can't expect me to.
Just about that issue, it is unfortunate. We need to absolutely work on it. I know that there was a meeting very recently I wasn't able to attend at City Hall on that very issue, but it is, in my mind, a mistake to go backwards. In Fairhaven, at the corner of Ferry and Grand, there are these empty spaces where there used to be benches. And I remember when elderly people would come out and sit in those benches and talk, and it was very social, and you walk by and you could sit and talk with them. And then there came a time where some young people started hanging out on the benches and sitting at the top and putting their feet in on the where you're supposed to sit, and the response to that was the city took the benches out. Right? So great. They took the benches out. So the kids are standing there, or they're standing in front of the stores. They were never engaged in anything that really addresses the issue, which has to do with what do they have to do and how do they express themselves and where do they meet. But now that space is empty, and the youth aren't there, but the elderly aren't there, and there's nothing. It's just a piece of the sidewalk that is not being used. So I would say the same. We are having unfortunate accidents. They need to be addressed. We need to keep working on design. We need to penalize drivers who drive unsafely, and we need to make our streets complete streets.
I would say I love the non-existent bike lane in my neighborhood, the Edgewood bike lane, that is still not existing, despite the many empty promises of Mr. Doug Halcyon, who was a former guest on here. I heard they put it out to bid, and nobody bid on it, so that's good.
Yeah, but that's another problem. Nobody.
Apparently, it was because somebody like doing all the signal work and the bike lane was just nobody wanted to do all of it. So, what about you, Sean? Do you love any?
I was gonna say I like the bike program, like the rental bike.
Oh yeah.
Thing. I think it still needs
more
to expand more. And
I gotta walk once a mile to get to the closest one.
But I think that's like New York has the city bikes, and then like a lot of cities like LA and Austin have like the scooters. And I've spent a lot of time in Austin, and I think that's like a really great. I mean, there's a lot of problems with there being too many scooters and people just being able to leave them anywhere.
Yeah.
But I think it makes the city easier to traverse.
Mm-hmm.
And like it makes the communities a little bit more. If you're traveling by bike, not only is it easier to get around for people who don't want to walk, but it's also like you get a chance to experience the community like.
Yeah, absolutely.
In first person, not just being cutting through the community on a
I see more on my bike, just looking around, and because you're slower, you're outside. You really experience the streets in a different way. When you're driving, you just gotta go. Where's the next fucking green light?
Yeah.
Do we want to do fuck with? I mean, do we care?
What do you say?
So define that.
I mean, basically it means like, it's good, but I'm not in love with it, Or we could go on to the next game. I feel like we're almost out of time, so let's just do the next game. It's fine. Nobody's gonna, the podcast cops
you didn't sound very excited about doing that one anyway. So.
I'd just rather jump to the next game. So one game I do actually like to play is Steal Something. And that's basically where we take something from another city that we like and would love to see in New Haven. So previous examples have been like the High Line from New York, or the pedestrian-only intersection in Burlington, Vermont, where there's just sort of like no cars allowed, their downtown area. So anything like that.
I like. There are a number of spaces in. I guess it's similar to that pedestrian-only intersection where it's like there are streets that are just kind of dedicated to just pedestrians, like just kind of cutting off any vehicular traffic whatsoever. Yeah. I mean, obviously bikes, whatever, but like I like those spaces.
Where would you put it?
Right here, Ninth Square.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Done.
But I also
there'd be even more people walking around. We'd have like a real Today Show situation. People just pressing their fleshy bodies against the window. That's going to be the excerpt from this episode, if you were curious. Cool.
So, a thought?
Yeah.
So
it's allowed. Go on.
I recently had occasion to meet some people. The organization actually started in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Mm-hmm. They're called Incremental Development. Mm-hmm. Their website is incrementaldevelopment.org.
Okay.
And what these folks did is they realized that among themselves, they had all the skills that are typically hired by developers, architects, real estate people, builders, demolition people, et cetera, designers. And what they did is they started looking at the neighborhoods that they live in, that they love, mm-hmm. and started identifying buildings and lots that were not being used and that no large developer would come into. It's just not big enough for them.
Yeah.
And they started working together on those buildings, designing, building, talking to people in the neighborhood. This involved civic leaders as well. Mm-hmm. And it worked out pretty well for them. So then they came up with the idea, we can teach other people to do this. And that's where incrementaldevelopment.org comes in, because it's a website where you can see and hear from people in such diverse places as Buffalo, New York,
Go Sabres.
Obviously Minneapolis, South Dallas, which is the poor side of Dallas. Okay. And you can hear stories of people who have taken the lead in their neighborhoods. So in my dream that I'm working on, mm-hmm. I'm trying to identify people from the neighborhoods in New Haven. Mm-hmm. Dixwell, Newhallville, The Hill, Fairhaven, etc., that are interested in being a point person or being part of a team that is looking at these spaces, not necessarily with any government subsidy, but there could be a government subsidy. But the idea would be what is available right now to be developed or redeveloped in the neighborhood that is small enough that we can tackle it. A one-family house, a two-family house, a 3 or 4 family, maybe a couple of apartments with an empty storefront. And how does one go about doing that? That's what the incremental development framework is about.
Cool.
And so that's
I
want to steal that.
Cool. That sounds great. I don't know. This isn't stealing something, but I've just decided that I'm going to just say this instead. Something that I would love is just an express train to New York that only stops New Haven, Bridgeport, Stanford, Harlem, Grand Central. There's so many stops, and we're far away from getting high speed rail, I feel like, so we may as well just all right, what if there was a couple express.
Yeah, they have a couple that come from Grand Central that do that, but they don't have too many that go
there's
way.
no and I feel like it just keeps now it's 2 hours 10 minutes to Grand Central. I'm damn, it just gets longer and longer. I'm happy for West Haven or whatever, but yeah.
Oh, another thing, angled parking. I want to see that.
Okay, nice.
It's space saving. It's more efficient. It's safer.
I'll trust you on this one, urban studies guy.
No, it's great. I like it.
I'm
and it looks cool.
To me as an engineer, I'm just you guys are talking about your majors. I'm I just see math and you're not math, right? You're just not math majors. I don't know. You did some sort of other non-math thing. Cool.
So we're outsiders is what you're saying to us.
I mean,
you see us as other.
Yeah, I definitely do. Yeah, it's a new form of classism based only on mathematics. So anyway, that is our episode. We're out of time. Thank you so much, Lee Cruz, for coming. Where can people learn more about your community outreach?
So I'm all over social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn.
Do you want to give any handles on those, or just go to Instagram.com and you'll be right there?
If you're from New Haven, it's not that difficult to find me.
Yeah.
Among them, all of them have 10,000 followers, so it's easy. I bubble up.
Whoa.
I bubble up.
You're an influencer.
You want to lend me some of those?
What kind of Lululemon pants are you hawking?
A few thousand, 1,000 to a few thousand in each of those.
Ooh, not bad.
For the neighborhood work that I'm personally involved in Fairhaven, go to www.chathamsquare.ning.com. You can see how we're working together with the businesses in our neighborhood, residents and businesses working together. We're also working, obviously, with the nonprofits, the library, the health center, the Mary Wade Home for the Elderly. But it's that dynamic that I think is moving us forward. Again, chathamsquare.ning.com. To see what I'm involved with nonprofits, obviously, there is the website of the Community Foundation, cfgnh.org. But I also manage a website, gnhcommunity.org, and that's about nonprofits sharing information with each other about what they're doing, what they need, how people might work with them. It's just an exchange. I'm hoping to start other websites like that for other areas that I'm interested in, like neighborhood development and also entrepreneurship.
What about maybe something on the dark web? You thinking like that?
I'm going to leave the dark web to some of those
criminals. Fair enough.
Folks. Yep, exactly.
To the dark sorcerers. That's what they call users of the dark web. Dark sorcerers.
Can I buy a spell up in here?
The Sith, maybe.
What about you, Sean? Where can people follow you?
Down the street. You follow me down. No, follow me on Twitter. If you see a tall,
good-looking black dude, it's probably Sean.
Probably me. Spiky hair.
Especially if it's like a Yukon.
Yeah.
Hoodie.
Follow me on Twitter, Highbrow Sean. Follow me on Instagram at Lowbrow Sean.
Nice.
And do not follow me on Facebook.
Perfect. BetweenTwoRocks.com, as always. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you next time, and have a lovely evening.
Bye.
Busy people and lots of yellies, Worcester hipsters and fat up townies. We have more than pizza in common, with 2 rocks for bookends. New Haven, New Haven, New Haven, between 2 rocks. Ba-da-da-da, 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 between 2 rocks.